In the county archive, Elias Mercer exists twice. The first entry appears on a brittle page labeled Unresolved Losses, Autumn 1907. The handwriting is careful, uniform, practiced by clerks who understood that order itself was a form of reassurance. 5 names are listed, each followed by age, occupation, and last known location. The final line, repeated for 4 of them, reads, "Presumed deceased. Body not recovered." The 5th name is crossed through with a single horizontal line. Next to it, written later in darker ink that pressed into the paper hard enough to scar it, is a correction: returned alive. That word, returned, is the only verb in the entire record that implies motion. The others simply end. Elias Mercer was 36 years old when he came back to Grey Fork. He had been born there, left briefly as a young man to work river camps further south, and returned again before 30, quieter than before but steady. He owned a small house near the edge of town, paid his taxes on time, and was known to keep his tools in good condition. Nothing in his life suggested he would one day become a question the town could not stop asking. On the afternoon of October 6, 1907, Elias emerged alone from the scrubland along the eastern riverbank, following the same narrow path the men of Grey Fork had used for decades to reach the water. He was not riding. He carried no pack. No mule followed him. No voices came from behind. The river was low that year. Witnesses later remarked on the quiet, how the water barely spoke as it moved over stone. It was the kind of stillness that sharpened sound. A snapped twig carried farther than it should have. Breath seemed louder. Elias's boots scraped against gravel, and a boy fishing downstream heard it and looked up. The boy would later testify that he did not recognize Elias at first. What he saw was a man moving with a kind of deliberate caution, as if each step required confirmation. The man paused often, not to rest, but to look back. When he finally turned toward town, the boy said, he walked like someone who didn't want to arrive. Word spread without anyone meaning it to. Grey Fork was not large. It existed because of timber and coal, and because the rail spur ended there, stubbornly refusing to push deeper into country that punished effort. Everyone knew when something was wrong. People felt it before they understood it. By the time Elias reached the edge of Main Street, men had stopped working. Doors stood open. Women leaned out of windows with wet hands. No one greeted him because greeting would have required choosing a tone: joy, relief, fear, and no one knew which was safe. What they saw unsettled them. His clothing told a story that did not line up. His shirt was torn but not violently, more as if caught and pulled free. His coat was gone entirely. His trousers were stiff with dried mineral residue, pale along the cuffs, the sort that came from walking long distances through alkali flats or dried stream beds. His boots were cracked open at the sides, the leather split from repeated strain. One heel was worn almost smooth. He bore no obvious injuries, no limp, no blood that had not already dried and darkened into something forgettable. But his hands were swollen, red, the skin pulled tight over knuckles that looked larger than memory allowed. Several people later described his hands as wrong, though none could articulate why. His face was what held them. Elias Mercer's face did not register surprise at seeing the town. It did not show relief. It showed something closer to composure, but not the natural kind. It was the expression of a man who had practiced stillness until it became habit. His eyes moved carefully, cataloging rather than connecting. He did not search faces for recognition. He did not smile when he was recognized. Instead of going home, Elias turned immediately toward the telegraph office. This detail matters because it contradicts what people expect of survivors. Most return first to shelter, to safety, to something familiar. Elias went to the place where information became permanent, where words were recorded and transmitted beyond recall. The telegraph operator, Henry Collins, later said Elias stood at the counter for nearly a full minute before speaking. Collins remembered the way Elias's fingers rested flat against the wood, as if pressing down helped him remain present. When Elias finally spoke, he did not explain himself. "I need the sheriff." That was all. No preamble. No apology for alarm. No mention of the others. Sheriff Wade Harlan arrived quickly. He had known Elias for years, had once fined him for letting a mule wander into the road, had shared coffee with him during a winter outage. Later, Harlan would insist that what struck him first was not Elias's condition, but his restraint. He wasn't wild, Harlan wrote in a private letter discovered decades later. He wasn't shaking. He wasn't asking for help. He looked like a man still under instruction. The sheriff took Elias into the back room. The door closed. No one heard raised voices. No one heard anything break. The meeting lasted 12 minutes. When the door opened, Elias stepped out first. Harlan followed, cleared his throat, and addressed the room with the practiced neutrality of law. He announced that a search would be organized at first light. He named the missing men. He said the county would bear the cost. He said any information would be appreciated. He did not say why only one had returned. Elias stood beside him, silent. Someone asked, "Eli, what happened up there?" Elias did not respond. Another voice, sharper, "Where are the others?" Elias turned his head slightly, as if aligning himself with sound rather than speaker. His answer was quiet but carried. "I can't." The word settled badly. People expected won't. Can't suggested something else. An inability, a restriction, a line he could not cross without consequence. When Elias left the office, Sheriff Harlan offered him a ride home. Elias declined without speaking. He walked instead, head down, through a corridor of waiting faces. Near the hardware store, Caleb Morris stepped into his path. Morris had known Elias since boyhood. He put a hand out, not to stop him, but to anchor the moment. "Eli," he said, "just tell us, are they coming back?" Elias stopped. He did not pull away. He looked not at Morris's face, but at his boots, as if grounding himself in something ordinary. "No," he said. "Why?" Morris asked. Elias's mouth tightened. The pause stretched long enough for someone to clear their throat behind them. "I can't say." That night, Elias did not light a lamp in his house. Neighbors noticed because they noticed everything. Darkness in the wrong window draws attention in a small town. People speculated he was sleeping. Others believed he sat in the dark deliberately. On Sunday, Mrs. Thomas Sutter approached him outside the church. Her question, "Did he suffer?" was the first that bypassed logistics and went straight to meaning. Elias's answer, "I don't know," was precise, limited, and possibly true in the narrowest sense. When she asked why he had returned, his answer was quieter still. "Because I did what I was told." That sentence never appeared in any official report. It survives only through repetition, passed from mouth to mouth with the unease of something that did not belong. And it marks the moment the town realized Elias Mercer was not merely withholding information, he was still obeying it. Any attempt to understand what happened in the upper country must begin with restraint. The temptation, especially in later years, was to search backward for signs, some early fracture, some hidden conflict, some foreshadowing that would allow the ending to feel inevitable. But the surviving testimonies resist that impulse. They describe not a group already cracked, but a set of relationships that appeared ordinary, functional, even trusting. This is important because it removes the comfort of explanation. The 5 men did not leave as strangers. They did not leave in anger. They did not leave under duress. They left in the way men had always left Grey Fork, with purpose that felt sufficient at the time, and with the confidence that experience would cover whatever uncertainty remained. Elias Mercer was not the leader of the group, nor was he its most outspoken member. He was, however, the most consistent. He had worked alongside Jonah Pike at the sawmill for nearly a decade, long enough for their movements to synchronize without discussion. They had cut the same timber, lifted the same loads, learned when to speak and when not to. Jonah was the kind of man who filled silence instinctively. Elias did not stop him. That alone made them compatible. Milo Vance was newer. He had arrived in Grey Fork only 2 years earlier, already carrying the impatience of a man who believed the town was temporary. He talked about opportunities elsewhere, about expansion, about using the mountains instead of working around them. People found him energetic, sometimes exhausting, but never threatening. He admired Elias openly, once telling a friend that Mercer was the kind of man who lasts. Daniel Rourke was different still. He spoke rarely and only when the subject demanded accuracy. His skill with animals was respected to the point of reliance. If Daniel said a mule could make a climb, men believed him. If he said the weather would turn, they adjusted their plans. His presence on the trip lent it credibility. Reverend Thomas Sutter remains the most debated inclusion. Officially, his reason for joining was simple. He had received word of a family living beyond the ridge, isolated, ill, unreachable once winter closed the passes. He intended to deliver supplies, offer what comfort he could, and return. The timber assessment route overlapped with his path, and the men agreed to travel together for safety and efficiency. Privately, some believed Sutter was restless. He had been in Grey Fork for nearly 15 years, long enough for sermons to repeat themselves, long enough for grief to accumulate quietly in his home. His wife later described him, in careful terms, as uneasy with stillness. There is no evidence of tension between Sutter and the others before departure. He had eaten at Elias's table. He had blessed Jonah's child. He had once mediated a minor dispute at the mill. Whatever personal motivations he carried, he did not burden the group with them. The days before the trip passed without ceremony. Elias sharpened tools. Jonah arranged for coverage at the mill. Milo talked loudly about the investors' interest, already counting future work. Daniel inspected the mules, rejected one, replaced it with another. Sutter packed supplies that had nothing to do with timber, bandages, small jars of medicine, extra blankets. On the evening before departure, the 5 men shared a meal at Jonah Pike's house. This detail appears in multiple testimonies because it later acquired weight. People remembered what was said, what was not said, how normal it all felt. Jonah's wife served stew. Milo told a story about a misjudged crossing that ended in laughter. Daniel ate quietly. Sutter asked Elias about a passage of road near the eastern slope, whether the bridge was still sound. Elias answered simply, "It'll hold." Someone asked if he was worried. Elias shook his head. "Not if we keep moving." That phrase, "keep moving," appears often in recollections of Elias Mercer. It suggests practicality. It also suggests a worldview in which pause itself carried risk. They left before dawn. Witnesses remembered the sound of hooves on frozen ground, the way breath showed briefly in the lantern light. There was no ceremony. No one waved. The men were expected back before the week's end. Absence at that stage did not yet mean loss. The first days of the journey were unremarkable. This is not an assumption. It is supported by evidence. The men signed the register at a way station on the second day. The handwriting was steady. They purchased supplies they did not strictly need, extra flour, tobacco, which suggests confidence rather than fear. A hunter encountered them near the tree line and later said they appeared in good order. There are no records of argument, no accounts of illness, no suggestion that the group fractured early. What stands out in hindsight are the minor choices. They took a route that cut time at the cost of exposure. They chose to camp lower than usual on the 3rd night, trading shelter for proximity to water. None of these decisions were reckless. Each could be justified. Each had been made before by other groups who returned safely. Elias's role during these days appears consistent. He deferred when others spoke. He checked equipment. He said little, but witnesses later recalled that when decisions were made, Elias nodded first. This detail is subtle, but it matters. It suggests not authority, but assent. He did not direct. He confirmed. The historian must be careful here. It would be easy to interpret Elias's later silence as a continuation of this pattern, a man who never spoke unless necessary. But testimonies from before the event complicate that reading. Elias Mercer spoke when it mattered. A neighbor recalled an argument years earlier when Elias confronted a foreman about unsafe conditions. He had not raised his voice. He had been precise. The foreman changed the schedule. Another recalled Elias stepping between 2 men at the mill, his words calm, final. The fight ended. Silence, for Elias, was not avoidance, it was selection. On the fourth day of the journey, the men diverged from expectation. This is the last point at which certainty holds. According to Daniel Rourke's notes, found later among his effects and confirmed to be written in his hand, the group encountered an obstacle along the planned route. A section of trail had been compromised. Whether by weather or by neglect is unclear. What matters is that it forced discussion. Two options presented themselves. One was longer, safer, known. The other was shorter, less traveled, but passable according to Daniel's assessment. They chose the shorter route. No one objected. This is where later narratives often attempt to insert dissent, to imagine someone warning against it, someone urging caution. But no such warning appears in the record. The men agreed. They adjusted. They moved on. The tone of Daniel's notes changes subtly after this point, not dramatically, not with alarm. But his handwriting tightens. His observations become more specific. He notes wind direction. He notes the mule's behavior. He notes silence where there should have been sound. These notes end abruptly. The final confirmed sighting of the group comes from a trapper who saw them at distance, moving along a ridgeline near dusk. He described them as spread out but together, which is a phrase that has invited interpretation. Spread out suggests caution. Together suggests cohesion. No one remembers hearing raised voices. No one remembers signs of fear. And Elias Mercer, who would later be asked again and again what changed, never contradicted this picture. He did not say they argued. He did not say they disagreed. He did not say they made a fatal mistake. His silence, in this block of time, is not conspicuous. It aligns with the evidence. Everything appears ordinary, and that ordinariness is what makes the disappearance intolerable. Because if nothing was wrong before the event, then whatever happened did not announce itself. It arrived quietly. And Elias Mercer was there to hear it. The separation does not announce itself in the record. There is no single sentence in any document that reads, "This is where it went wrong." No witness report shouting. No trace of panic appears in the notes. What exists instead is a narrowing of options, of space, of time, and a series of small decisions that, once taken, could not be recalled. The historian's task here is not to invent drama where none is recorded, but to trace the moment when unity quietly ceased to function. The last confirmed point of cohesion occurs late on the fourth day. Daniel Rourke's notes place the group near a narrow cut between two ridges, a natural funnel that directed wind and obscured sound. He writes of uneven ground and poor sight lines. These are practical observations, but they also signal a shift in posture. Men who had moved side by side began to space themselves deliberately. Spacing is not fear. It is protocol. According to the reconstruction, Elias Mercer walked third in line, behind Jonah Pike and Milo Vance, ahead of Daniel and Reverend Sutter. This arrangement was not fixed, but it matters because it positions Elias in the center, able to see forward and backward, but responsible for neither extreme. The weather was holding, cold but manageable. No storm, no visible threat. The kind of conditions that lull experience into confidence. At some point near dusk, the group encountered terrain that forced another decision. The path ahead dropped sharply into a ravine that offered shelter, but limited exit. The alternative was to skirt the edge of a slope, exposed longer, but with clearer lines of retreat. This time, the decision was not unanimous. Milo Vance argued for speed. He pointed out the light. He pointed out the weather. He wanted the shelter. Daniel Rourke hesitated. His notes record the slope as treacherous under frost, though he does not assign urgency to the concern. Jonah Pike deferred to Elias. This detail appears in two separate testimonies, offered years apart, by men who could not have coordinated their memory. Both recalled Jonah turning his head slightly, not enough to be obvious, and waiting. Elias did not speak immediately. When he did not frame his answer as instruction. "We can split," he said. That sentence, brief, neutral, enters the record through inference rather than quotation. No one claims to have heard it verbatim, but its effect is visible in what followed. Splitting the group was not standard practice, but it was not unheard of. Men did it to manage terrain, to move faster, to handle uneven skill. It was a risk weighed against other risks. The final arrangement placed Jonah and Milo on the faster route, descending toward the ravine with the mules. Daniel and Reverend Sutter would take the higher path, slower but safer, with the understanding that the two groups would reunite before full dark at a marked stand of trees. Elias remained with Jonah and Milo. This choice is the most scrutinized of all. Why did Elias not remain with the slower pair? Why did he not insist on keeping the group intact? Why did he not object? The record offers no answer, because Elias never explained the reasoning. What can be said is that nothing in the moment would have flagged the decision as fatal. The distance between the routes was manageable. Sound should have carried. Sightlines should have re-established themselves within the hour. According to the reconstruction, this is the moment when the group ceased to be a single entity. Not violently, not dramatically, functionally. The trapper who saw them later that evening described them as spread out, but together. This description fits the configuration at the moment of separation, two ahead, two behind, with space between, but intention aligned. What happens next is known only through absence. The two groups did not reunite at the trees. Jonah and Milo arrived first. They waited. The mules shifted restlessly. The light thinned. Sound diminished in the way it does when temperature drops suddenly. Elias said nothing. According to the inferred timeline, it was Milo who first suggested moving back up the slope to meet the others. Jonah hesitated, not out of fear but out of calculation. The ravine offered shelter. The slope offered uncertainty. Elias listened. What he said, if he said anything, is unknown. What is known is that they waited. This waiting becomes significant later because it is the last passive choice before the situation demanded action. After an estimated 40 minutes, Jonah went alone to check the slope. He did not return. This fact is supported by evidence recovered months later: tracks, broken brush, a dropped glove identified as Jonah's by his wife. The direction of the tracks suggests urgency, but not panic. Milo and Elias were left together. At this point, all reconstructions converge on the same conclusion. Something occurred that forced Elias into a position of response rather than decision. Milo Vance was not known for silence. Yet no one ever claimed to hear his voice carried on the wind. No call, no shout, no argument. The historian must resist filling this void. What can be stated is this: when Elias Mercer later returned to Grey Fork, he did so without Jonah, without Milo, without Daniel, and without Reverend Sutter. And when asked about the moment they separated, he never denied that he had agreed to it. He never defended it. He never condemned it. He simply refused to speak of what followed. Sheriff Harlan questioned him repeatedly on this point. Not aggressively, methodically. Harlan wanted to know who made which choice and when. He wanted to reconstruct responsibility. Elias's answers were precise but empty. Yes, he said when asked if they split. Yes, when asked if he stayed with Jonah and Milo. Yes, when asked if they waited. When Harlan asked what happened after Jonah went back up the slope, Elias's answer changed. I can't, he said. Harlan pressed. He rephrased. He narrowed the question. What did you see? I can't. What did you hear? I can't. What did Milo do? Elias closed his eyes. I can't. This repetition frustrated Harlan, but it also unnerved him. It did not sound like defiance. It sounded like a boundary Elias had encountered before and learned not to cross. Later, when the county investigator arrived, he attempted a different approach. He framed the questions in terms of help, closure, relief. Elias listened. Then he said, if I tell it, it doesn't stay there. This sentence appears only once in the record, scribbled in the margin of the investigator's notebook, unacknowledged in the final report. What there meant, whether a place, a moment, or a condition, was never clarified. The separation, then, is not merely physical, it is narrative. From this point forward, Elias Mercer occupies a position no one else does. He stands on the boundary between what happened and what remained unrecorded. The others crossed fully into absence. Elias stopped just short, and whatever held him there, whatever rule or understanding governed that position, did not release him when he came home. The search began the morning after Elias Mercer returned, but in truth it had already begun the moment he walked into Grey Fork alone. What followed was not chaos, it was procedure. And procedure, when faced with absence, becomes a way of pretending that time is still obedient. Sheriff Wade Harlan organized the first party before sunrise. Horses were borrowed, ropes checked, lanterns filled. Men volunteered not out of heroism but obligation. These were routes they knew, losses they feared, names they recognized. The sheriff read aloud the plan as if clarity itself might prevent confusion from spreading. Elias Mercer was listed among the volunteers. His name was crossed out. Harlan later said Elias declined quietly, without explanation. He did not argue. He did not bargain. He did not suggest alternatives. When pressed, he said only, "I can't go back." This refusal unsettled more than anger would have. Men who refuse out of fear can be persuaded. Men who refuse out of guilt can be pressured. Elias refused as if returning was no longer within his authority. The first search lasted 3 days. They followed the known routes first. They marked trees. They called names into ravines that swallowed sound. They found signs that meant nothing alone. A disturbed patch of earth, a bent branch, tracks that could not be separated from their own. On the second day they found one of the mules. It was standing where it should not have been standing, tethered loosely, alive but exhausted. Its packs were missing. Its eyes showed no panic, only confusion. The rope had been cut, not gnawed, not snapped. This detail entered the report without commentary. The third day yielded nothing further. Weather moved in. Snow threatened higher ground. The search retreated, not because hope was gone, but because conditions were beginning to punish insistence. The second search was smaller. The third smaller still. After a week, the county declared the remaining men missing. After 2 weeks, presumed dead. After a month, the language shifted subtly in conversation. People stopped saying when and began saying if. Throughout this, Elias Mercer remained in Grey Fork. He was questioned repeatedly. Sheriff Harlan spoke to him first, then the county investigator, then a representative from the rail company who wanted reassurance that liability ended at the town line. Later came a journalist, then a minister from a neighboring parish. Each approached him differently. Each failed. Elias did not stonewall. He answered what he could. Names, dates, routes, weather, provisions. He confirmed what others already knew. What he would not provide was sequence. He would not say who moved first. He would not say who spoke last. He would not say what changed between waiting and not waiting. When asked directly why the others did not return, his answers never shifted toward explanation. "They didn't," he said. "Where were you when I was there? With who? With them." These answers frustrated the investigators, but they also placed Elias in an impossible position. Present without context, witness without narrative. Pressure mounted quietly. It did not arrive as accusation at first. It arrived as concern. People brought food to his door. They asked if he was sleeping. They asked if he needed help repairing his fence. They asked gently whether talking might ease the burden. Elias thanked them. He accepted what was necessary. He declined what required conversation. As weeks passed, the tone changed. People began to wonder why he alone had survived. This question was rarely spoken aloud, but it shaped behavior. Elias felt it in the way conversations stopped when he entered a room. In the way eyes lingered, not accusingly, but searchingly. In the way children were pulled a little closer when he passed. A rumor emerged that Elias had been spared intentionally. Another suggested he had been chosen. These rumors never settled on a cause. They circled him without landing, feeding on the absence of denial. Mrs. Sutter returned once more. She came to his house in late November, after the first heavy snow. She did not bring food. She did not ask to come inside. She stood at the threshold, hands bare in the cold. "I need to know what to remember," she said. Elias listened. "If I don't know how it ended," she continued, "I don't know how to pray." This time Elias did not answer immediately. When he spoke, his voice was even. "Remember him how he was," he said, "not how it stopped." She asked him why. Elias's reply was the longest he would give to any personal question. "Because if you change it," he said, "it keeps changing." Mrs. Sutter left without speaking again. That winter, Elias worked when work was available. He did not drink more than before. He did not isolate completely. He attended town meetings. He paid his debts. He did not leave. This too unsettled people. Men who carry secrets often run. Elias stayed. The county investigator submitted his final report in January. It concluded there was insufficient evidence to determine cause of death or responsibility. It recommended no charges. It cited weather, terrain, and poor visibility. Elias Mercer's name appeared only as survivor. No motive was assigned to his silence. The town supplied one anyway. Some believed Elias was protecting himself. Others believed he was protecting the dead. A few believed he was protecting something else entirely, something that did not belong in words. Elias never corrected them. Years later, when asked by a visiting historian why he had never left Grey Fork, Elias answered simply, "I already came back." The aftermath did not end with closure. It ended with endurance, and Elias Mercer endured in a way that suggested not healing, but containment. Years passed. Grey Fork did not forget, but it learned how to live around the absence, the way towns always do. New men arrived to work the mill. Children grew into the names they had once heard spoken in hushed tones. The ridge paths filled in. The trees that marked the failed meeting place were eventually cut, milled, and repurposed into houses whose occupants never knew what their walls once signified. Elias Mercer aged. He did not become reclusive in the way stories prefer. He did not turn bitter or volatile. He did not drink himself into spectacle. Instead, he thinned. His movements grew slower, his posture more deliberate. He worked when he could, then less, then not at all. He attended fewer gatherings. When spoken to, he remained polite, attentive, brief. He never married. He never spoke publicly about the trip. What is striking in the long view is not that he remained silent, but that his silence never wavered. People tried different strategies over the years. Some framed their questions as concern, others as intellectual curiosity. One young reporter, decades later, approached him under the guise of writing about frontier resilience. Elias listened, nodded, and declined. "I already said everything I can," he told her. She asked when that had been. "Before," he replied. The historian encountered Elias Mercer's name for the first time in a ledger, not a story. It appeared as an anomaly. A corrected entry, a returned body without narrative. Curiosity led to documents. Documents led to testimonies. Testimonies led to gaps. And at the center of every gap stood the same figure, a man who could have spoken, who was asked repeatedly to speak, and who chose, with remarkable consistency, not to. The temptation, especially from a modern perspective, is to interpret this silence psychologically. Trauma, survivor's guilt, repression. These explanations are comforting because they locate the mystery inside Elias, where it can be managed. But the record resists that interpretation. Elias Mercer was not incoherent. He was not evasive. He did not contradict himself. He did not fracture under pressure. His answers were measured, repeatable, disciplined. This was not the silence of confusion. It was the silence of containment. Several details support this reading. First, Elias never claimed ignorance. He never said he did not know what happened. He said he could not say. Second, his language, when it edged closest to explanation, framed speech itself as a problem, something that would not remain neutral once released. "If I tell it," he said once, "it doesn't stay there." Third, and perhaps most telling, Elias never used his silence to protect himself socially. He did not deny rumors, He did not attempt to clear his name. He allowed suspicion to exist because correcting it would have required articulation. That choice suggests a hierarchy of risk. Whatever Elias believed words would do was worse than being misunderstood. The historian interviewed one of the last people to know Elias Mercer personally, a woman who lived next door during his final years. She described him as gentle, methodical, careful with objects. He treated things like they remembered, she said, like they carried what you did to them. When asked if she ever pressed him about the past, she shook her head. He was already holding something, she said. You could see it. You don't pile onto that. Elias Mercer died quietly in 1943. There was no obituary beyond a notice, no family to dispute it. His belongings were modest. Among them were no journals, no maps, no confessions disguised as notes. Nothing that suggested preparation for explanation. The absence was complete. In the end, the historian concluded that Elias's silence was not a failure of courage, nor an inability to remember. It was an act of judgment. Whatever occurred after the separation, whatever sequence of actions, instructions, or understandings emerged in that narrowing space, Elias Mercer decided it was safer left unspoken. Not because it was unbelievable, but because it was transferable. Words carry. They move from mouth to mouth, mind to mind, changing shape, acquiring permission. Elias Mercer, who survived when others did not, may have understood that survival did not end with leaving the mountains. It continued in deciding what not to bring back. The others crossed fully into absence. Elias stopped at the threshold, and there, deliberately he remained. No final statement was made. No answer was given. The silence held, and it still does.